Have you ever met somebody for the first time and immediately you started to make some assumptions about them? I've been on a few mission trips, and every time you go on a mission trip, before you leave, you get a chance to meet your team, and you get a chance to do some training. I remember specifically I was going on a trip to the Dominican Republic, and there was one team member who was just a little bit older than everybody else, and I kind of made an assumption about this person. I'll call this person Maggie, okay? It's not their real name. But I looked at Maggie and thought, man, this trip is nonstop. I hope they're going to be able to keep up. And man, was I wrong. I found myself having trouble keeping up with Maggie. We did a VBS several days throughout the week, and we ministered to over 600 kids. And Maggie's jumping up on stage, dancing with them, joking around, breaking up fights at times. And then she's going out into the streets of the Dominican Republic, and she's witnessing to people, telling them about Jesus. And I found myself just struggling to keep up with how much energy and life that she had. And I had made a completely wrong assumption about her. You know, while we were on the trip, we got a chance to have a long bus ride, and I sat by Maggie, and, you know, I got a chance to hear more of her backstory and get more personal with her. I learned that when she was a kid, she used to work on cars with her dad, and she knew a whole lot about being a mechanic, and I know nothing about that. She actually used to be in a motorcycle gang and travel the country on Harley Davidsons, which is just fascinating to me. She doesn't look like that at all. You would never assume that. And I just learned a whole lot more about all the things that she's been through in her life. A lot of ups and a lot of downs. She's been through a whole lot in her life. And it really opened up my eyes to the fact that many times we make assumptions about people before we ever really know who they are. And that bus ride really gave me more of a complete understanding of who she was as a person. And it helped me understand, and I gained a whole lot more respect for her. We often assume we know the stories of other people just by what we see maybe on Instagram. We think because we follow them on Instagram, we know their story, and we know nothing about them. You know, we may know where our friends live, but until you step into their home, until you step into their personal space, you won't truly begin to know who they are. You see, everyone has a backstory. We all have things in our lives that have happened to us, the good and the bad, things that we've gone through, things in our families and our friends, and all of those things intertwine to create and make the story of our lives. Have you ever had a rough morning? And then all of a sudden, you just took it out on the first person you saw. Maybe you spilled your coffee, you missed the bus, you woke up late, all these things. It ended up setting you up for just a bad day. And as soon as you saw that person, you just lashed out on them. Now, I think that a lot of times when that happens, we find ourselves saying, well, I just wish that they could give me more grace. They don't know what I'm going through. We find ourselves saying, if they only knew what kind of morning I had, or they don't know what I'm dealing with at home, or I couldn't sleep last night at all, or we say things like, I'm angry all the time, and I just don't even know why I'm angry. And we expect people to show us more grace when we fall short. But we find ourselves a lot of times not having that same mindset when others are short with us, when our friends lose their temper on us, or when we run into a bad situation with somebody that we know. We never take the time to just stop for a moment and ask ourselves, why did this person just snap on me like that? Giving grace to our friends and our families is in the same moments is so important, because the reality is we never know what they are facing. We never know what someone else is going through. And we rarely take time to understand their backstories and to get personal. Now, over and over in the New Testament, Jesus took time to get personal with people, especially people that no one else wanted to take the time for. We see that Jesus looked for opportunities specifically to get more personal with people. We've been looking about and talking about this guy by the name of Zacchaeus, right? And how Jesus walked into his life. And we're going to look at a passage in Luke 19, verses 5 and 6. And we're going to see, and I want you to think about how Jesus is strategic about stepping into Zacchaeus' life and getting more personal. This is what it says in verse 5. It says, when Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. You see, Jesus invited himself over to Zacchaeus' home, no matter what anybody else thought. He didn't care what everybody else thought. In fact, this is what the rest of the town thought. In verse 7, it says this, "But the people were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner," they grumbled. Jesus didn't care about what everyone else was saying. He wanted to step into the place that Zacchaeus was the most comfortable, his home. You see, your space, your home, is where you let your guard down. It's the place that Jesus knew he could get closer to Zacchaeus and break down all the barriers and all the walls and all the assumptions about him. We are so much more than just our physical address. Understand this, students. Our circumstances and situations are the windows into who we really are. Our circumstances and situations are the windows into who we really are. Jesus understood this the most, more so than any of us. Now, don't forget, Jesus is God, so he already fully knows and understands Zacchaeus. He understands all of Zacchaeus' backstory. Jesus was around long before Zacchaeus was even born. But why did Jesus take the time to just go to his home? Because he wanted to make it more personal for Zacchaeus. He wanted Zacchaeus to understand and know that I care about you. I care about your backstory. I care about who you really are, not what other people say you are. Now, what can we learn from that? What can we learn about how Jesus treated others and how we can maybe differently treat those around us? The Apostle Paul says it like this in Philippians 2, verses 5 through 8. He says this. He says, "You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a servant and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on the cross." You see, students, Jesus stepped into our world as a human. He walked the earth and stepped into our story to experience our world the way that we live it. Jesus made God personal for us. Now, don't forget, Jesus was once a baby. He had to use the bathroom. He cried all night. One time, his parents actually forgot him, left him for days at the temple. He had to deal with siblings, just like you and I. He experienced loss of one of his best friends when they died and passed away. He dealt with people ridiculing him and doubts. Jesus knows. He knows what you're going through. He knows the hurts you carry, the worries that you have. He knows the doubts that you have in him and the things that keep you up at night. He knows your hopes, your dreams, your prayers, but he doesn't simply just know them. He wants to step into your home, the place that is personal to you. He wants you to know that he doesn't just know your story, he understands it. And here's the truth. Here's the one truth that I want you to hear and know and understand tonight. It's personal because Jesus understands your story. It's personal because Jesus understands your story. He not only knows your story, he understands it to the fullest, more so than you and I could ever imagine, even more so than you and I even know about ourselves. And since he can understand our stories, we can take steps in our lives to begin to connect with him more, connect with others more, and connect with ourselves more. Let's get real for a second, though, okay? Sharing ourselves, sharing our story with others, sometimes it's a little bit challenging. And even taking the time to hear other people's stories, it's just hard because getting to know somebody can be messy at times. So what do we do? How do we step into this new reality of some things that we need to do? Well, here at The Social, our mission, our sole purpose is to help you do three things, okay? The first thing is find God. The second thing, find friends. And the third thing is find yourself. And we believe that when you do those three things, when you begin to find God, when you begin to find friends, when you begin to find yourself, ultimately you will find life and the life that God created you to have, like John 10:10 talks about. So for some of you, here's three things that I want you to think about, okay? For some of you, this is the first step that you need to take. The first step is just wrestling with the idea and acknowledging that Jesus knows you, all of the pieces of you, and that he wants to step into your story. I want you to spend some time wrestling with the fact that Jesus knows you better than you know yourself, and yet he still loves you, and yet he still desires to have a relationship with you. He is understanding. He is caring. He worries. He doesn't worry about you. He knows every single worry that you have, and yet he still loves you, and even in all of your mistakes and all of your blemishes. Jesus wants to step into your life. He wants to get personal with you, just as he did with Zacchaeus. Now, for others, your first step, your next step needs to be let someone else into your story. Begin to open up a little bit. Begin to get real, get personal. Maybe you've been coming to the social for a long time. Maybe you've been coming to the social for years or for months or for weeks. And each week you come in the doors or you watch online and you stop with the connection right there. You don't allow anybody into your life. You don't allow anybody to get more personal with you. Maybe God wants you to know that he has placed you in the lives of other people so that those other people can uplift you and help carry you and carry your burdens and walk alongside of you in life. This is a safe place, a place for you to open up about your story. There are people around you who want to hear about you. They want to hear your story. You know, most of you have small group leaders, and your small group leaders are intentional to care about you. They're sacrificing their time each and every week to put forth effort to getting to know you better. Maybe tonight's the night that you take a next step and say, all right, here's what I'm going through. Here's my backstory. Here's my life. Here's some things that I struggle with. Can you pray for me? That's what doing life is all about. And lastly, for others, it's time for you to start looking into and really understanding the story of other people. Maybe you've been coming to the social for a long time. Maybe you've been in the same small group for a long time, but you only know the names of everybody. You don't even know what school they go to. You don't know a whole lot about them at all. And maybe tonight is the night that you begin to say, hey, let me hear some more of your backstory. Let me hear a little bit about what you've gone through, and let God speak to you and use you and encourage you through someone else's story. Taking these 3 steps can help you find God, find friends, and find yourself. That's what we're all about here at The Social. And this has been week 3 of It's Personal. Now remember, it's personal because Jesus understands your story.